Good afternoon and welcome to the grand final of the Mini Worlds Chennai 2019. The two teams in the final are on team proposition, the team from Hong Kong, and on team opposition, the team from the Netherlands. Congratulations to the two teams for being fantastic through the tournament and making it so far. Our judges for the round are Julio Maya from Mexico, Harish RCA, Dhruva from India, Laura Gunning from Australia, who will also chair the round, Dhananjay and Tejaswini from India, and Rory RCA. The motion for this house is that this house regrets the glorification of hard work. Without further ado, I'd like to request the first speaker from Team Proposition to deliver their speech.
It is depressing that at the end of some people's lives, they're lying on their deathbeds wondering, what did I work for? After countless hours of people telling you, work harder for something or work harder for simply the sake of just working hard, that's where we end up with people not knowing what they've achieved in their lives simply because they spent it so deep and busy looking at just simply working instead of knowing where they're going. We think this is reprehensible and regrettable, and I'm so proud to propose. What do we think is the definition of glorification of hard work on our side? We think it is a pervasive force that infiltrates and permeates many parts of society. We're talking about things like cultural trends, like the American dream, the Protestant work ethic, the idea that China has more than like 1 million proverbs about why you should work hard or work in the moonlight to try and study for your next exam. That's the culture I came from. That's the culture I don't really appreciate, right? We're talking about advertisements that continually bombard you and tell you, work hard at the gym and you'll get better, you'll become fit. Politicians that tap into the same exact narrative and tell people that, look, some people who are not privileged, they come simply because they don't work hard enough to improve their lot. That's the kind of thing we're talking about when it comes to glorification of hard work, about achieving success. That is the only single metric that alternatives, like notions like socioeconomic status, like genetics, like sheer luck are forgotten because they tell you it doesn't matter. All you need to do is take that pen, that paper, and write, and you'll be able to achieve success. We think that's the kind of hard work that we have in a society today, and that's the kind of hard work that we want to regret. What am I going to prove to you in this debate? Two things. Firstly, why you make individuals' lives more miserable on several levels, and then second of all, why we think it's an impediment towards the removal of structural inequalities and obstacles within society. So, what do we stand for in this debate? We don't have to stand for a world on the comparative where we have no hard work whatsoever. We simply have to stand for a world where hard work is not glorified to the extent to which hard work for its own sake is a virtue. We think we have to just show you that a world in which hard work is still respected but not taken as good in and of itself, but a means to an end, is a world that is structurally better for people to have. The yardstick to judge this round is to understand whether or not people live happy and fulfilling lives, because understanding that success is only coming down to the individual's happiness at the end of the day is what's most important in this debate, not some abstract notion of success in general, right? And that's the thing we're willing to stand for. So, why do we think individuals are more miserable in the status quo? The basic understanding of what hard work does to people is that it often forces people to work and exhaust themselves, right? Look at Japan and how their work ethic has resulted in millions of people being praised for the fact that they work 12-hour days and they are so exhausted and they walk and lie flat on the ground in the middle of parks, exhausted and sleeping, and people say that's an example of an upstanding man and citizen you want to be. Exhaustion that is glorified as a result of hard work being glorified in general as a merit in and of itself is a culture we have that forces people to be exhausted. But more perniciously, it's also the attachment of hard work to someone's moral fiber. The assertion that because you don't work hard enough, that you are not good enough as a person. Just listen to the comments that people have. You are lazy. You're entitled. It is a weakness of your character and your personality that you refuse to work hard. What does this mean? It means it forces people to have to sacrifice all of their energy, their time towards goals, to work hard in general. This means that personal things that matter to them and interests that are immaterial are therefore discarded. The notion in, for example, in work about productivity, telling you they should just spend more time at work at your job and you receive more for it, that's the kind of notion that creates this kind of incentive. What is the material impact of this? It means that workers are afraid to ask for more time off because they get called out for being lazy and untitled. They call out for not being dedicated enough to their company, and they're therefore structurally disabled because they don't give you promotions, because you value other things, because you don't work hard enough. We think that's the kind of thing you have terms of material harm towards people. In terms of students, it means that parents continually pressure and hound upon you to tell you that you have to work harder in your exams, that your failure is directly as a response of you not responding hard enough to the stimuli in front of you. That is the kind of issue that we have in society. That's something that we cannot stand for. Third of all, the mechanism by which hard work is enforced in society, shame. We think this is also pernicious because what it basically has is it results in people who fail being ashamed of themselves because they understand and their conception is that anything is possible insofar as I put in time and effort and I exhaust myself. What this means is that for people who are, because of structural reasons, aren't able to do so, because they can't find any more forward steps, they start working hours on end. It means they feel inadequate. It means that they give up and they feel like they are a failure upon themselves, especially given what I told you about attaching this to notions of moral fiber. We think this results in so many people feeling depressed or getting in positions where they are materially more psychologically hurt, right? It's also a shame that's continued by members of society because of the nature of glorification. It means family members also chide at you for not going out to work when you're unemployed or because the economy isn't good enough. For example, we give you an example in Japan again, in 2008, after the immediate crisis where many people were laid off, people, because of familial pressures, simply got up, got to work, and instead of working because they don't have a job, sat in parks with their computers open, pretending to work because they're too ashamed to not be working at this current moment. That's the kind of shame you get where people performatively do work just because they don't want to get shamed by their family members. I think that's really sad and disgusting and depressing that that's a world that we have to live in where this kind of thing happens. But alternatively, another layer or example of where this affects people, for example, in the realms of fat shaming, right? Where people try their best to lose their weight, but for genetic reasons are unable to do so. But the shame impacts them in so many different ways because it's simply because people assume that they haven't worked hard enough, they haven't been to the gym enough when genetic factors are actually locking them in the way. We think the fact and the lack of understanding of this only makes it so much more worse for people with images, with problems with body image. What is the comparative on our side? Why do we make this better when you don't glorify hard work, right? Understand what this means is that people change the way in which they dream and conceive of their goals. Because hard work fundamentally tells you that you can achieve anything as long as you put time into it. That means you dream big, you're ambitious, and you always think that you can achieve the best, always setting yourself up to failure because only one person that can be the president of a country at any time, despite the fact that millions of children dream of the same thing, right? We think that's the kind of harm that you have. But also, what you have is therefore people changing their dreams and adjusting it realistically to circumstances and understanding what is good for them, right? Especially in terms of the big dreams. It means they're more reasonable. It means they're also more willing to also retrospectively understand the reasons for their failure aside from their own self-worth and trying to look for other ways in which they could possibly improve. Another counterfactual also to understand is about the difference between working hard and working smart, right? We think in our world what you have is more people understanding that working hard isn't good enough. What you have to do is work smart, be effective with the way you work and effective with your time and be productive and not simply just hammering at it again and again and hoping that you get it the last time. Yes?
Your analysis relies on there being a goal of hard working which is unreachable. Considering that most people consider themselves to be a hard worker, do you not think this actually gives them more satisfaction in the work that they would regardless do anyway?
We think it is disgusting when hard work is celebrated in and of itself as an end. We think that when you suggest that people are happy just working hard, that's sad. You're happy when you achieve an outcome, not when you're simply working. That's so depressing. That's exactly the kind of model that capitalism tells you to do to feed their companies. You think that's gross, okay? Second argument, why do we think this is better than an impediment in removing structural obstacles? Because when you put blame on yourself because of hard work, when children are told it is your fault, not for structural reasons, people don't group together to fight, right? We're talking about big structures like politicians who leverage this and tell you that the reason why they're poor and they don't deserve welfare is because they don't work hard enough. That's the structural inequalities that exist and permeate in society because it's on a belief of hard work. We think this is an extent of harm which is a magnitude larger than just individuals feeling sad. It's individuals being structurally locked out because they're blamed and they're even convinced that it's their own fault that they're stuck in their lot. We think that is a depressing world where this kind of issue permeates, right? Understand what we've told you today is that harm exists not for the individual, but also for society. We think that's so much more harmful. We are so proud to propose.
I thank that speaker for their speech. I'd now like to call upon the first speaker from opposition to deliver their speech.
Michelle Obama was born into poverty, faced countless challenges, and she could have given up at any stage of her life. But she didn't. Her insistence to work hard, to push through and overcome any challenge persisted. And we tell you today that the glorification of hard work enables everyone, and specifically the disenfranchised, to achieve a better life for themselves. Moreover, we tell you this glorification is a crucial societal notion upon which campaigns for labor rights and pensions are built. So incredibly proud to propose today, in this speech, how glorification gives people the push to climb the social ladder. Secondly, why glorification leads to more support for policy for workers. And Alien will tell you why people will actually feel better about the work than you're necessary to do. But before that, some rebuttal and a context. So firstly, on their definition of glorification. We are going to give you a far more nuanced definition on this. We have three things that we think the glorification of hard work looks like. Firstly, we tell you it looks like people valuing work regardless of the outcomes. That means that proposition has to defend a world where all the value you give to people is based on the outcomes of the work we do. We have to support a world when in doing the work itself already is valuable. Secondly, we think that people believing that working hard leads to them achieving certain goals. This means that simply the glorification of working hard means people are actually likely to dream big and believe that dreaming big is a good thing and they're going to do that. Thirdly, we tell you glorification hard work means respecting the sacrifices people make for that hard work. This means respect the garbage man who has to stand up at 6 a.m. each morning. This means respect the worker who has to work double shift because he otherwise can't make ends meet. So why is our context then more realistic than that of side of proposition? Firstly, we tell you simply society doesn't look like the world they're portraying. Maybe this is true in Japan, but we're talking about multiple countries in the world. In the USA, in England, in the Netherlands, in Germany. This is all not what's happening. Our context is far more realistic there. Secondly, we tell you multiple people made this narrative, right? Presumably, they are not okay with this extremely coercive narrative. This is far more nuanced. Thirdly, we tell you this is about an individual. Therefore, individuals are likely to believe that they themselves are a hard worker. Therefore, they themselves are likely to buy into this glorification because they want to feel better about themselves. Okay, but now a little bit, a very small part of rebuttal. They tell you people dream big. We tell you this is an extremely good thing. Why? Because they do it anyway. But now, once they feel like they are able to value the work they put into it. We tell you if they're going to feel on each side of the house, better be with a little bit of dignification on the hard work they put into that. Let's move on to my first argument. How glorification gives people the push to climb the social ladder. We give you three independent layers of analysis here. Firstly, because this glorification makes them believe their goal is achievable. Why? Because glorification means they think that if they work hard enough, they're going to achieve the goals they want. Without, a person from the Bronx is very likely to believe that someone who's far richer than they are, who has more connections than they are, who has a better education than they are, they're never going to be able to compete with it. This glorification gives them the belief that if they work hard enough, if they push enough time in it, they are going to achieve the things they want. But moreover, it means that if they are afraid to do so because they're afraid to fail, this belief means they're able to think that bar isn't that high because even if they fail, they're able to value the work into that, meaning the sacrifices they made are worth it in the end, even if they don't have the success. On such proposition, the only thing they're able to think is, if I don't succeed, I failed, we at least give them some kind of reward. Secondly, we tell you they get a push from their community. Why? Because at the moment your parents think working hard is desirable, your teacher thinks working hard is desirable, they are going to push you to work harder. Now, proposition told you well, but they are going to be burned out. Firstly, we tell you in the majority of cases, people don't always burn out. You know when at some time you need to stop. This is something people are able to see for themselves. But even if that's not true, and we take them at our best, we tell you burning out is something on the short term. The values you get from this hard work, the job you're able to get later in life, the education the things you learn in the educational system are things for the longer period of time. We tell you that's far more important than the burnout. We tell you the glorification means that people inside your community push you hard, not hard enough to get a burnout, but hard enough to achieve the things you want. But lastly, we tell you this glorification gives you the motivation inside yourself. It means you're willing to work harder. It means you're the one who is able to stand up early in the morning because you're the one who wants to achieve certain things.
Point to me, please. In a society where everyone has the same view on hard work, why is it still necessary to burn yourself out to get a competitive place in the job?
We tell you not everybody is going to work that hard, but the people who are now afraid to do so because they're afraid of failure, those are the ones who need this glorification. We tell you at that moment, we give them that push that's necessary. But why is this so important? We tell you these people have immense potential that they're unable to unlock because they're too afraid of failing, because they don't see the value in the pathway to the success. That means we're the only site that's able to give these people the opportunity to unlock their potential. Let's move on to my second argument, why glorification leads to more support for workers. 2 reasons why workers are more able to get public help due to this glorification. Firstly, more respect from society. How does this work? We tell you at the moment you glorify hard work in itself, you're more likely to respect people who put work in it. That's the reason why more and more people see the poor as victims of their surroundings, not simply as lazy people. We tell you that because they're more sympathetic towards their group, they're more likely to give up certain things, like money, like political capital. That means we have more ability to get certain kind of policies for these workers. This is the reason why in the last years we have more welfare, we have more abilities and more social help for these people. But secondly, we tell you this is a retrospective motion, right? They need to have a world where this glorification never took place. We therefore tell you they can have a world where there were labor unions. Why? Because labor unions are built on the idea that workers worked hard and were able and had to make certain sacrifices. That means that without this glorification, labor unions were never able to be in place. That means that all the good these labor unions have done, they have higher minimum wage, lower hours, where some things they can never claim for their side of the house. So what's the impact of this? We tell you the reason we have pensions right now is because people value the work people were put inside their lives. Therefore, they are able to live off their pensions later on. We tell you this is the reason we have scholarships, because they enable people to work hard, even if this isn't something they would otherwise be able to do. We tell you this is the reason we have minimum wage, giving people the dignified life they deserve. This is the reason why we have all the policies we nowadays have in society. And no, we are not perfect. We are far away from having the perfect utopian world we're going to give social welfare. But the glorification of the hard workers give people at least some kind of respect from society to have the political capital they desperately need in order to get these policies. We tell you because we're the only site that gives people the push they need to get themselves out of the poverty trap, to climb the social ladder, because we're the only site that's able to give people the social capital they need. So proud to oppose.
I'd like to thank that speaker for their speech and request the second speaker from Proposition to deliver their speech.
Panel, I come from Hong Kong, and I think this is one of the places in the world in which the effects of this motion can be most pervasively seen. That is, in a city in which one of the most pervasively wealth unequal cities in the world, the poor blame themselves for not working hard enough, and society blames them for being lazy welfare leeches. That's to say, I come from a city in which when students fail exams, they're motivated to commit suicide, to jump off buildings, because they think it was their personal failure and not working hard enough for the determinant of success. That is the culture we find reprehensible. That is the culture they had to defend. I've never been more happy to oppose. Two clashes about individuals and society and which side makes their lives better, like which side creates more general happiness in these areas, an extension about like classes of people, like things like race and gender, and how we often use like notion of work to collectively stigmatize them and put those people down instead of dealing with structural inequalities. On the first level, about which side brings more happiness to individuals. The basic clash in characterization so far has been this. We told you that hard work was a fundamentally oppressive force, that because external factors exist in a world in which you think that is the only determinant of success, when you inevitably fail because of things out of your control, you feel shame from other people and you blame yourself, and that creates an amount of unhappiness that we find unacceptable. They said simply that was a motivator for success, and this is like a classic example of rebuttal by example when they brought up Michelle Obama, and that was it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're more than willing to say that Michelle Obama primarily succeeded because of things like luck, because of things like privilege, that she was able to go to things like Princeton University, for instance, that she got those advantages in life because of chance, right? The fact of the matter is, opposition can't change the fact that external factors exist. Things like the structural inequalities my partner talked about, things like stigmatization, racism, and sexism. The fact is, this debate is about whether people believe that is to be the case or not. So why is it worse when they believe that external factors don't exist and is primarily an innate spring of energy energy that leads them to success. Because when they inevitably fail, they're far less able to cope. The counterfactual they have to deal with is this. In a world where hard work is less glorified, where it's not seen as a primary determinant for success, people are more realistic, they are more willing to live in the moment, they're more willing to live life as it is instead of how they wish it to be, and in the case where they do have goals, they set them more realistically. We think it is the case when people cope with the fact that there are some things in life that they can't control, and when they have to deal with that fact, they probably live better lives later when they've dealt with it and they understand that not everything is within their realm. We think when people lose that attachment, they live more happy and fulfilling lives. No thank you, I'll take a POI off my rebuttal. Secondly, this idea that hard work has intrinsic value in and of itself. I simply don't buy the analysis that they gave you for a couple of reasons. The simple response is this. Hard work is painful, right? And people don't put themselves through excessive amounts of hard work without some purpose. The reason why people are willing to do this in the status quo is because of that culture, right? That's the inherent gateway to your goals. That's why people are willing to do things like cram before an exam or work 12 hours in Japan for a job. It's not because they enjoy that or because it's fulfilling in any way. They never managed to prove that. The fact that they're moving towards their goals means that the analysis they wanted to bring up about hard work having some a priori value has no sign this debate. They needed to do more work to prove that. The third idea, this like absurd idea that labor unions don't exist when hard work isn't glorified. I think that wasn't even explicitly proven enough to be relevant in this debate, but as a further attempt to cross the floor, surely it's a case comparatively that workers suffer far more on outside of house. They never engage with any of our substantiation about overwork, overstress, over a constant toxic desire to compete with other people because success can be taken by someone who works harder than you at any moment. That's a climate that exists in workplaces when it's hard work specifically and primarily that is emphasized. That's the kind of culture you get. We think it's far worse for workers, even the best case version of their argument is comparatively far worse on outside of house. But saying clash then, about society, the main response to this was other countries exist than Japan. But the point is, in those countries, the glorification of hard work has been chipped away at, right? In countries like England and Netherlands, you have people increasingly beginning to consider that external factors exist that are outside of people's controls. That's what we're willing to support, because we think in the culture, when you don't consider those external factors, that's where the harm accrues. We can't debate in places where, this culture is being stripped away at because that's our best case and an example of how benefits accrue to our side. That rebuttal doesn't work. They're not debating this debate. But yeah, so again, this idea that competition becomes more toxic, we think society is generally worse off when you have people less willing to cooperate with each other, because the idea is if you cooperate, you're basically conspiring with the enemy. Someone else who could potentially take success away from you if they work harder than you. That's an atmosphere that we find to be appalling, right? And it means that individuals in the long run, in terms of wider society, people interact less. They're less willing to engage with people on the basis of fellow human beingness. Instead, the comparative is they treat them as competitors, people who can conceivably work harder than them and achieve the goal before they do. We think that's toxic and bad for people, right? Before I continue, sure.
On your side of the house, the only determining if you are happy is whether or not you're going to be successful. Don't you think that for poor people, they're never going to be able to achieve that success if they don't believe hard work is able to achieve something?
Wait, but surely that's the side that they have to defend, right? Surely they have to defend a world in which people believe that success, which is gained through working towards that success, is the only determinant of happiness. We told you straight up, we're more than willing for people to set more realistic goals that they can conceivably achieve using some level of work, sure, but not this idea that hard work overrides external factors, and that secondly, that they can live more in the moment, that life doesn't just have to be about goals specifically and working towards an endless series of goals, but simply living in the moment, living life for the sake of it instead of continuously working towards an ever-shifting infinite amount of preferences and desires. We think that's fundamentally bad that human beings live like that. They can't change the nature of our case. That's a straw man. That's not what our case was about. The second thing, before quickly, note that all of their harms basically only exist in a world where hard work is already glorified, right? Their basic idea is if you opt out of hard work right now, you're going to get outcompeted. Exactly. That's precisely why we regret it, right? And we would rather live in a world where those pressures, right, to force you to work didn't exist. We don't think that was enough. My extension then, about classes of people. Notice that structural inequalities reduce the likelihood of success, right? Employers are less likely to trust you if you're a black person in the United States, for example, and you have less access to resources from the get-go. The matter of fact is this, but the problem is this, right? In the status quo, hard work is determined to whether you're successful or not. So people think that that is the root cause of the problem. What is the problem then? That classes of people are collectively seen as either unwilling or unable to work. That's where you get things like the black people in the ghetto, the stereotype, right? That they're lazy and they're not not willing to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. We think that's inherently harmful. That's where you get stereotypes like women are unable to do white collar work. They're unable to engage in the sort of hard work that men are able to, and that's why that inequality exists. What's the comparative on outside of the house? You get less of that victim blaming. The responsibility isn't shifted on those people to solve the problem, but rather they're more able to speak out. On their side of the house, those people get shut down. They're told that they're lazy instead of having their problems listened to. On outside of the house, we at least solve a bit of that. So people are more able to speak out about the structural inequalities and tackle the root of the problem. We think fundamentally that it would be better to tackle the root of the garbage man's poverty instead of simply respecting them. We think our side achieves more material benefits for the signalized people they wanted to make this debate about. At the end of the day, because they're not really debating the crux of this debate as it stands, because they're not engaging against our countermodel of living life as it should be, like in the moment, instead of a constantly shifting series of goals, we think that's fundamentally toxic. We think that's unacceptable. I am more than happy to propose.
I thank that speaker for their speech and request the second speaker from team opposition to deliver their speech.
Panel, I want you to take a moment and realize that even though the case of the proposition sounds very intuitive, live in the moment, carpe diem, it's not the reality. Because the reality is that not everyone is as privileged as they claim it to be. Not everyone can just simply work less and then have a great, fantastic life. There are people who need to get out of structural poverty, and at the moment they think that they're doing the right thing, at the moment other people give them respect for working, that gets them out of the poverty cycle. People who need to work anyway, that's a group that we specifically help. Not everyone can live like Hong Kong and say, I'm just gonna work less and have a great life. That's the reality they need to engage with. In my speech, a couple clashes. First, on the quality of life. Second, on policy. But first, let's deal with this stance, right? Because DPM, repeated again, it's the glorification of hard work. That's the only path you can choose. But hold on, that's not what that actually means, right? The fact that one thing is glorified doesn't mean that there are other life paths that you can choose that aren't glorified as well. For example, the glorification of building a family is also a very life path that you can choose that's also very much respected. We don't think you're necessarily coerced into one significant path. That's why we say don't believe their context of Japan, right? That's the most extreme case they can choose for their side of the house. We think in most countries there are very legitimate paths that you can choose, and not just in their world. That means that they're not coerced in this. So on to the quality of life. They brought you this argument of basically you're going to have a miserable life. 3 ideas they had under this. First of all, they had to prove that people can choose to work less. Again, Rivka brought you specific analysis on people, some people that need to work, poor individuals. We think this narrative helps them because it gives them self-confidence. They are working 3 shifts at night and thinking this is worth it. Other people telling them it is worth it. Hard work is the right thing to do. Those people are going to work anyway. On their side of the house, they don't get the gratification. They're going to feel miserable. I'll expand on this later. We think this is a large group because it's a majority of people who are not comfortable like they say. The majority of people simply don't have the luxury to say, I'm now going to carpe diem and just live life for today. We think therefore we already win this group. But second of all, they had to say that working hard is bad. The PM talked about a student studying hard, but he conveniently stopped at what happens after that. Because after that, that student has a diploma from a very good university that enables him to get a good job to provide for his family. Yes, they prove, perhaps in their best case, short-term harms. What we tell you, the short-term sacrifice leads to long-term benefits that you cannot reach at the moment you are not motivated to work as hard. But also we think it becomes better because the reward you get becomes better at the moment you work harder, right? We think it's often at the moment you work extremely hard for a university grade. It feels better at the moment you finally have it. That kind of reward intrinsically will only happen on our side of the house. But in their best case scenario, again, students have terrible student years or workers work 10 years extremely hard. We've proven to you that the long term is more important because they finally get pensions. Students can get better jobs instead of having to work a lower paying job because they didn't work hard enough in high school. But on my third idea, on how people set unreachable goals and feel miserable. Why is it unlikely that they will set unreachable goals? I think in general, panel, you need to understand that people want to feel good about themselves and are very aware about their capabilities. Therefore, it's unlikely, I will expand on this later, why they will set unreachable goals that they will never reach. Most people know they will never be president and they will never strive for it. Therefore, they will strive for a more realistic goal, such as I want to have a seat in my local council because I like politics, but I know that I'm never going to be president. Therefore, therefore it's more likely to set smaller goals or sub-goals. But even in their best case, right, where people set unreachable goals and everyone is going to be president, we think because of the glorification, the work in and of itself in reaching the goal, even if you're never going to reach it, stays satisfactory. Because you're constantly told, you're doing a good job. I respect you for the work you put into this. On their side of the house, there are still going to be people who want to be president. But instead of being told, I respect what you do, people don't understand it because it isn't glorified. They think it's an easy thing to reach that goal because they don't understand that hard work is necessary. We think the goal itself is not glorified, but the work that you as an individual put into it. But what happens if we take them at their best? What happens if people fail and feel like a failure, right? This is the thing they rhetorically try to push, but let's look at why it won't happen. So why is it more likely that people feel good about themselves after they failed than bad and feel like a failure? We think, sure, we're willing to bite the bullet. On the short term, if you don't reach your exam and get the grade you wanted or don't get the promotion, it might feel bad. But here are 3 reasons why it's unlikely that it's going to last for the rest of their lives and is short-term harm at best. First, optimism bias. It's very confrontational and hard to think of yourself as an inherent failure. We think on the short term you might think it's bad but it's very hard to feel constantly like you're a failure because it's very exhausting. It's more likely people start making up excuses for themselves to make themselves feel better. For example, yeah, they got a higher grade, but that's because their parents were richer, not because they worked harder. Yeah, Hong Kong might win this debate, but it's not because they worked harder, but because they have better coaches. It's things like that. Intrinsic excuses, I'm so sorry. It's excuses that people make to make people feel better about themselves, so they don't have to confront themselves with the reality. The majority of people are likely to make excuses for themselves. Yeah, sure, a handful of people are already insecure or become more insecure, but those people are going to see the negative in anything anyways. Secondly, people have friends and family who are likely to tell them that they're not a failure. So even if we believe them and say, I think I'm a failure because I didn't get my university degree, you constantly have a social circle that's going to tell you you're not a failure. You did your best. The reason why people are going to listen to these people is because often they have an emotional connection. And in the case of parents, they have authority over those people. That means that they're likely to believe people because they trust them. That means that even if people think they're a failure, or someone in Japan lost their job, they have family who's going to tell them that they did a great job anyways because they have an emotional connection to them. But thirdly, the fact that something glorified doesn't always mean you need to reach the top and that you're going to compare yourself with people who have reached the top, because you're probably going to still be content with mediocre. For example, sporters are glorified, but if I'm a runner, I'm unlikely to going to feel bad at the moment I don't run as fast as Usain Bolt because I'm aware of my capacities. They say everyone's going to strive for the top, but I think it's more realistic that people know what they're capable of because they've lived with themselves for a couple years, therefore they know. Then onto policy. They say welfare is likely going to increase. We think most people in welfare specifically have a sympathetic factor. Single mothers, people who are ill, those people always going to have that sympathetic factor that's going to keep having them welfare. But here's where Rivka's analysis comes in, where they say we have more capacity, right? They strawman us and say, well, we're always going to have labor unions. But the problem is, at the moment, people respect workers. They think you deserve pensions. You deserve pensions and other things. Therefore, because it's glorified, we get better policy. But now to my third substantive, how people get more respect from people around them. We think because of the glorification, people put value upon hard work. We think, first of all, as Rivka explained, this leads to people feeling intrinsically good about themselves. That means their third substantive about minorities. Even if people around them don't believe them, minorities themselves, because they believe the same narrative, had the idea, even though others don't understand me, I think I'm doing a pretty darn job because I work hard, because I work the double shifts as anyone else. We think there's a group that always needs to work because of structural poverty. That group's going to feel better. But second of all, because other people give you more respect. Because other people value this narrative as well, meaning that they're nicely to you. That's why we still respect single working moms, because we respect the way they work so incredibly hard to combine the burdens of family and work at the same time, even though they are disadvantaged and minorities. That means that the most vulnerable group of people who are always going to have to work ridiculous hours will have more gratification, respect for the work they do. But intrinsically, they will feel better, which will not have happened if people don't put value upon hard work in the first place. I'm very proud to oppose.
I thank that speaker for their speech. I'd now like to request the third speaker from Proposition to deliver their speech.
Listen to the language of Team Netherlands. Poor people exist in structural poverty, therefore they have to work harder. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the definition of structural poverty? It exists for reasons outside of your control. You are trapped by the structure of the society you live in, and you are poor through no fault of your own, through no inadequacy of your own. Team Netherlands would have that one person work multiple shifts, gaining no ground until the day he dies. Team Hong Kong acknowledges that the glorification of hard work is one of the mechanisms through which the powerful put that poor person down, put the responsibility of poverty upon him as opposed to the exploitation carried out by the upper class. That's disgusting. There are 12 million Americans right now who work more than one job but yet live under the poverty line, and that's partly because of the glorification of poverty. Working harder does not get you anywhere. We reject this motion. Three clashes to the House today. First of all, on attainment. Second of all, on self-esteem and happiness. And finally, on social inequality. First, on attainment, right? What they told us was a simple line that you succeed more when you work hard. First of all, we think that that's not necessarily true. 3 reasons for this. First of all, because Bernd told you right from his first speech why smart work is more effective than hard work. We got no response on this idea, so let me just give you 2 more reasons why this is true, right? First, because when you burn out, you're unable to work in a sustained fashion. That means that you work in small bursts and are unable to carry out long-term projects. If you don't show up to work after 2 weeks of intense work, for example, your boss will fire you. It's much more sustainable for you to work continuously over a long period of time in a healthy and reasonable way. But second of all, trust me, as a veteran of all too many, like 4 a.m. cramming sessions, I would know that your creativity seriously dips when you've overworked yourself and you're too tired to go on any further. We think that smart work is far better than hard work. We think that furthermore, the third reason for this is because hard work isn't necessarily the solution to your obstacles, because a lot of the time, when you're struggling to attain your goal, there are other obstacles that can't be resolved by just you applying more force. If I'm struggling to understand a concept in math class, for example, it might not be the solution just stare at the textbook for another 3 hours until I burn the images into my head. The solution is to concede that maybe the responsibility is on me to be less lazy and focus harder in class, but to actively reach out to my teacher and ask for help, because hard work isn't the solution for everything, and hard work can't solve all your problems. We think that when people are shamed for not working hard enough, we think that that's an obstacle for working effectively and achieving your goals. We think that furthermore, when people try again, but continuously fail, we think that means that they see that there's something wrong with themselves as opposed to something wrong with the circumstances in which they live. We think that means that they're far more likely to give up. We think that it's actually counterproductive. But second of all, Team Netherlands had a higher burden than to show that sometimes hard work is useful for success. They needed to prove that it's necessary for success and that we can't get a success in a world without this hard work. We think that they completely failed to do so, right? And we think that people can still work hard, especially those with a key goal in mind. Because Bernd set up for you right from first speech that the difference between the glorification of hard work and a world without it is that in their world, hard work is seen as inherently good versus seen as a means to an end in ours. Therefore, if you have clear goals, if you want to get a job, then you might want to work harder, but you don't feel coerced into doing so for no reason other than because you feel like you have a responsibility to, because it's shameful if you don't. We think that finally, we're willing to bite the bullet, right? And say that even if we don't attain even if attainment is lower, even if the job that they say is so important isn't gotten, why do we still win this clash? Because their reason for a job being more long-term than the short-term health and happiness of not working hard is because it's a lot more long-term if you get into a good university. Our first response to this is there's no off switch to the glorification of overwork. It's not like I can work hard and then I get into uni and then I can chill and enjoy my life for the rest of my life, right? You continuously work futilely towards a goal that keeps on moving farther and farther beyond you. But second of all, we think that what's the point of a job, right? The point of a job is to give you money so you can live a decent life, so you can balance all your responsibilities and live a healthy, fulfilling, happy life when you've achieved the goals that you yourself want to set. When these goals compete with hard work, it means that these people suffer. We much prefer a world where you can balance your need to work hard with your need to, for example, look after your children, spend time with your family, or pursue your hobbies, as opposed to just continuously working towards a goal. Yes.
If you don't value the work itself, don't you glorify the success, not the hard work?
Right, I'll be getting onto that in this clash, right? Because what they told us was that social inequality is fixed because respect of the respect for work means that the poor are recognized better. Like, our first reason for this is just that it's just not true. Like, the garbage man isn't celebrated for getting up at 6 a.m. every day. He's condemned for not working hard enough when he was in school. And the reason for this is that the hard work and the suffering that someone might go through is less visible than the outcome of their work. So we think that people might see the fact that so it's like obvious to the person that maybe they didn't get as good grades in school and therefore be condemned for not working hard enough. We think that that clash actually falls on our side. But now onto my second clash on self-esteem and happiness, right? Because what they told us was that individuals think of themselves as hardworking because of the culture of glorification. We think that this is an insertion that was disingenuous because extroversion and charisma are also glorified, for example, and yet we don't all see ourselves as extroverted. We just see that as a social ideal that we ought to be working towards, and when we fall short, we feel ashamed of ourselves. But what we told you was rather that people feel exhausted, they feel ashamed for falling short of their goals, or because they see themselves as too lazy or as too weak, or they're told that they're too weak to achieve their goals, for example. We think that their response to this was a dodge because they tried to support a world with none of our harms, but if there are none of the harms, then where does the motivation come from if there are no consequences to not working hard enough? But the other response to this was that people don't dream too big because they know themselves, right? Our first response to this is that everyone is over-optimistic about our own capacity. We overestimate the amount of stuff we can get done. And part of that is because of the culture of glorifying hard work. Because we think that as long as we work hard enough, therefore, we can achieve that goal. And they don't have to be the President of the United States as they try to strawman us into proving. It could be losing an unrealistic amount of weight in an unrealistic span of time. And that leads to people just forcing themselves to eat less and starving themselves because they think that hard work is the solution to everything. We think that all accrues more harm than good. We think that when they fail their dreams, regardless of whether they're big or small, they fail. But finally, they told us that people would make excuses for themselves for when they fail. We think that forgiving yourself for sometimes not reaching your goal is key to living a decent and fulfilling life. We think that furthermore, in a society where we're encouraged to do our best to meet our goals, we think it's highly unlikely that people just lose motivation and stop working at all. And finally, on social inequality, right? I've already addressed part of this clash, but they also gave us the idea of labor unions and scholarships. Look, labor unions don't exist because people think that hard work is a good thing. They exist because people like shorter work hours, because they like higher wages, so they fly in the face of what you support. We think that it's just not exclusive to the hard work motion. But finally, on their idea about how it pulls the poor up, right? For the nth time, we told you that the excuse of the glorification of hard work is something that's fed to the working class, such that they believe that the reason that they're poor is because they're less hardworking than the billionaire who said that, oh, I got here because of $1 million loan from my father. The rest was all my own hard work. We reject that narrative. Vote team proposition. Thank you.
I thank that speaker for that speech. I'd now like to request the third speaker from team opposition to conclude the constructive speeches for the round.
The largest brunt of analysis that comes from team proposition relies on their characterization they failed to justify. That this glorification ignores external factors like race and the birth lottery, and that this often pushes on unrealistic expectations. In my speech, I'm going to disprove this characterization, but I'm going to tell you that even if you believe that this is true, we win this debate regardless. Because what we tell you is that a significant group on both sides of the House has to work. We tell you that unrealistic expectations exist besides the glorification. We tell you that fat people would always feel pressure to become skinnier when they look at advertisements of people who look better than them. We tell you that there will always be structural disadvantagements, and therefore that people always need an incentive to work harder. On our side, when these people do put in the work to put food on their table, at least they feel better about themselves because they feel like the society finally respects them for putting in that hard pit of work. We think that because of this, we win the debate. But in my speech, three main questions within this debate. Firstly, what does glorification look like? I'll first take a POI.
Do you really think so, little the poor, that without the culture of hard work, we will cease to put food on the table?
Look, what we tell you, first of all, is that likely they would probably still put food on the table, but on our side, they have more ambitious goals and they're more able to go beyond putting just food on the table, actually having a job that they can be happy with. But second of all, because on both sides of the house, the poor need to put food on the table, on our side, they feel better about the process of doing so because they feel more respected in the process of putting in hard work. But what does this glorification actually look like? A realistic characterization. Because if you believe them, it means striving for unrealistic expectations. Because if the glorification means only getting straight A's, it would indeed promote suicide and the shame that they talk about. But why is this likely not the case? Two main reasons. Firstly, we've already told you these expectations are set upon you by other people, but you are likely to put expectations on others that reflect the expectations that you have for yourself, because you're not going to put things on that you don't think that you could achieve. At the moment where you don't think some of the goals that you are putting on others are achievable, you're likely not going to put them on the first place, and therefore they're likely to be achievable. But secondly, we simply said that people are likely to surround themselves by people that care about them. And we don't think that people show that they care about you by putting on expectations that you can never achieve. That means that your parents are likely not going to push you to get straight A's if you just aren't that smart at school in the first place, and therefore we'll be far more proud of you instead that you're putting in that hard work. No, thank you. What does a realistic characterization then look like? Yes, we concede. Probably it means being a bit more ambitious, being able to put in more work to get better expectations. But it's not like the goals that they set up, things that are never achievable. We think that it's likely smart goals that are within arm's reach. But also, we think this characterization is simply, for example, your parents thinking that you are great because you tried your best to get the highest grades, not simply only getting those grades. It is the process, not only the results. What, then, is the effect on the individual, second question in this debate, of this characterization? What they tried to push on us is that people are promoted to overwork, simply like promoting stress on that person because of this glorification. But what we told you, on the other hand, is that this is inherently a way off. We concede. On our side, people have to work harder because they feel like it is more respected and more important in society. But we tell you that is inherently a good thing because working hard is only a short-term struggle as opposed to the results that you see are long-term things that benefit you. And we really receive two main attacks on this analysis. Firstly, they tell you that working hard does not necessarily lead to better results. The way that we target this is simply by saying that the work smarter argument doesn't work for two reasons. Firstly, they only provide really specific examples. Yes, maybe in some cases not putting in more hours doesn't lead to better results, but in the vast majority of cases, putting more work in probably will lead to you being more likely to get a promotion or being more likely to get higher grades. Secondly, we think that at the moment where smart work actually leads to better results, people are likely to engage in this anyways. Like, we don't have to support people being completely irrational on our side, just putting in like the work that they think is necessary to achieve those goals and being happy when they do so. The second attack we get is people will never feel like they have enough, like they want to push expectations further and further. What we tell you is that first of all, that these expectations are unlikely to be unrealistic, but second of all, we tell you that that's not necessarily a problem. You can still derive extreme satisfaction from achieving your initial goals without necessarily achieving the goals after that. Like, I can be very proud to have reached the semifinals without necessarily having gone on to the finals, even though that is a goal I set upon myself when I reach that step. We don't think that they are exclusive. People will get a lot of more satisfaction at the moment where they achieve these goals that we set upon them. That means that on our side, we support this long-term satisfaction that you derive from achieving more rewards. Then they say that this also leads to more shaming for people because they don't achieve these unrealistic expectations. Because I've already taken that down when I said that these expectations are unlikely to be that unrealistic, doesn't stand. What we told you, on the other hand, are that people are likely to feel better about themselves because the moment where work is glorified, it means that when you do go to work, when you do put in those hours, people are likely to respect you, and you are likely to respect yourself as well because you are doing what society tells you is something that is inherently beneficial. They've completely ignored this characterization where we tell you that the process is just as glorified as the results as they are continuously talking about. What that means on our side, like when the example they want to use of fat shaming, when a person who is obese does put in the effort, even if they don't achieve their goals, they can be extremely proud of themselves for trying because society tells them that hard work is good, but also we tell you it means that they're far more likely to try in the first place. On the individual, we achieve just much more long-term results that lead to more satisfaction, while on their side, people are more likely to be complacent and less likely to actually be happy if they do have to put in the work regardless. But then secondly, on the effect on policy, and this their analysis largely relies on the characterization that this means that we should ignore external factors. Why is that untrue? Provide two reasons. On an individual level, we say that people have a positivity bias and are therefore unlikely to see themselves as failures because of of working hard, and therefore will, at the moment where this is glorified, and therefore be more likely to actually blame external factors. But secondly, we simply think it makes sense. When a society values hard work, thinks that hard work leads to better results, and some group of society that works their ass off every day doesn't achieve those results, they're far more likely to look at those external factors for being to blame rather than hard work in the first place. That means that on our side, we actually think that we get more of those policies for the marginalized groups that they talk about. But if we take them at their best, we think that probably there's still some welfare on their side just because of sympathy. There's probably some labor unions on our side. We think that's a realistic comparative. But what we tell you is that labor unions almost exclusively campaign on the idea that we need to reward the hard workers of society. People that have worked their entire life needs to have some form of pensions when they get out of it. They can say these would exist regardless. We tell you yes, but on our side they have way more political capital to achieve the goals they want because society respects them for the things that they do. What does that mean? We tell you that we inherently value these pensions and rights for laborers more than the welfare that they talk about, simply because it affects more people, the vast majority of people work and need pensions later. But secondly, it's a more vulnerable group of people that need pensions when they retire because they're unable to work otherwise, while on their side, the majority of people in welfare often achieve jobs later in life anyways. That means on our side, we help that more vulnerable group, we achieve those pensions that we talk about, and we finally make working hard something that you can reward yourself for. So proud to oppose.
I thank that speaker for their speech and now request the opposition reply speaker to deliver their reply speech.
I think we all agree that for those who are born into rich families who will always go to university, the glorification of hard work doesn't really make a difference. I do, however, think that we also can agree that for the poor, for the vulnerable who don't feel like they have any added value to the work, except for the work that they themselves do, this glorification does make a huge impact on their lives. Firstly, what does glorification actually look like? Secondly, how do people feel on themselves? And lastly, on the policy. So does the glorification look like the coercive definition of proposition? No. Thirdly, because we told you there are more glorified paths and therefore it isn't as coercive as they claim to be. Second, they defend the glorification of success. Why? Because if you don't get respect out of hard work, if you don't value work in itself, you don't glorify work. You glorify the success you might get at the end of the work. We told you from the beginning that having value inherently is the glorification of its work. I asked this in a POI, no response from 3 prop. But moreover, I already gave you 3 reasons why our narrative is far more likely in my PM, where they completely disregarded that analysis. So what does this glorification and actually look like? It means people value the work because of the work. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to write inefficient letters for 6 hours a day. You can do the smart work side proposition claims, but it means that when you work, your work is being valued. Secondly, it means that working makes things seem achievable. And no, that doesn't mean that if you're stupid, you suddenly are going to believe you're going to university. But it does mean that if you think you are smart, you are likely that with a little bit of extra work, you might get that scholarship. But thirdly, we told you, it means your sacrifices are respected. I mean, you're more likely to get that political capital that you mean. So what does this mean for the entire case of side proposition? It means they can't claim extreme feeling of failures because it isn't that coercive, because the path leading to that failure is a path that you value in itself. It means they can't claim all those burnouts because it isn't that coercive. But even if we bite the bullet, I already told you in my PM, well, we're okay with more burnouts because that's a short-term loss, while we have far better long-terms. So then, let's move on to how people actually feel about themselves. Firstly, on the poor. We tell you they don't have options. We agree with the structural problems in society, right? We don't think this glorification is going to solve it. But we do think that once you are forced to work 3 shifts a week, you get more respect because people value your work. What does that mean? It means firstly, you're more happy with yourself, but secondly, it means you get the political power to eventually, and maybe that's 50 years from now, and maybe that's tomorrow, get the political capital to get people out of that structural poverty. It means you get the political power to actually make sure you have pensions, to have a higher minimum wage, to make sure people get scholarships that they need to get them higher on the ladder. But secondly, we told you that we have people with unlocked potential who need this glorification because they don't believe they're ever going to reach that success. And maybe they won't. Maybe we live in such a bad society that there's no way that ever a black person is going to get into Harvard. But at least they work their asses off getting there, making sure they see the inherent value in that, making sure they at least get benefits from that work. This means that even if we don't reach the ultimate goal of a perfect society, we at least make sure people get the inherent motivation from themselves, from their community, and the belief they're actually able to do those things. Meaning that at least they're more likely to at least achieve some long-term benefits. On side proposition, they needed to defend a world where if you believe their realistic goals, all those people would never feel like they're going to do this. Means they are going to be structurally stuck in the situation they were born in. We tell you, even though we might not be able to get the perfect solution, we're more likely to make sure they at least reap some benefits of it. The glorification of hard work might not benefit in society as a whole, but is necessary for the poor and those who have no other chance to unlock their potential.
I thank that speaker for their speech. I'd like to call upon the proposition reply speaker to conclude the case for proposition and the debate as a whole.
One major clash and another minor one. Who achieves more happiness and who achieves more mobility, respectively? Let's start with the former. The reason why this debate has been so confusing is because within this general area of the debate, what's important to notice is that Team Netherlands has been talking about two incredibly different things this entire time. About attainment when you eventually succeed in working and the gratification you get from hard work a priori in and of itself. They tried to shift their case to the latter after Schalke proved to you that they never established a link between hard work and success. That's to say why hard work inevitably leads to the kind of success they're talking about, because if it doesn't, you get none of the benefits from attainment. So let's deal with the reframe then. This idea that hard work gives you gratification in and of itself, even if you fail, it's okay because you feel like you've done your best. The problem with this is that this debate wasn't just about single individuals working towards goals. We told you that we were fine with that in P1. What they had to deal with was the pervasive culture, prioritizing hard work over everything else, and coercing individuals that didn't want to act in the way that Netherlands wanted people to behave into subscribing into that belief. But even if that is the case, our conception means that their conception is less likely for two reasons. One, that you feel shame from other people when you are content in a world where hard work is prioritized over everything else. If you're content in their world of being a garbage man, if you feel like you're doing your best in that position, what happens? You get patronized, you get ridiculed. Because in a society in which hard work is prioritized over everything else and the successful are seen as working harder, you're still going to be characterized as lazy. You're still going to be characterized as not doing enough with your life. The contentment they wanted to talk about fundamentally doesn't exist. But the second thing, that you're stuck in whirlpools of toxic competition, that you don't get to set your individual parameters of what success means like they told you, because other people are competing and trying to work harder than you. So there's a rat race within the workplace, for example, but there's a rat race in wider society in which those goalposts get pushed further and further behind. So that's why their characterization of long-term contentment simply isn't a part of this debate. But about the second characterization that I just dropped, how do we win there? The reason why the sort of contentment we told you we get on our side, when you drop any pretensions that work is valuable in and of itself and try to live life to the fullest now, is better than any form of instant gratification, it's for a couple of reasons. One, again, because it's an unfair game on their side of the house. The goalposts keep shifting. The society keeps pressing you to work harder and want more. You're never going to get any of the long-term contentment that you get on our side of the house. Two, that you don't know when their gratification will occur. Again, they never proved to us why it was certain that you will succeed just because you work hard. The vast majority of evidence in status quo indicates the contrary, that there are external factors like inequalities and things like shared luck that means that just because you put hard work into something doesn't mean that you're likely to get a proportional amount of success. The fact that this is true means that our form of happiness is just a lot more reliable. On the second idea, this idea of social mobility, neither side realistically is able to solve external factors completely. So on what side are the people that are marginalized and have relatively less privilege happy? Let's just compare the two worldviews we got. On opposition side, they were basically willing to defend a constant treadmill of work for the poor. That is to say, at the end of the day, they basically resorted to saying that sure, maybe they will be unable, they're less likely to achieve success as people with privilege, but as long as they keep working, they have some level of contentment. We think that constant treadmill is reprehensible. We'd rather it be the case that they realize the conditions that surround them and realize why they are less able to achieve success than the privilege. But the second thing, that entire bow we got from O2 about how they make excuses, that is to say, they literally admitted that the best case on their side is people creating delusions to avoid the pain of failure on their side of the house when hard work is intrinsically tied to their self-worth. But the second response is, if they wanted to mitigate all of the harms out of this debate, none of their benefits from motivation even happened. So they debated themselves out of this round. What happens on our side of the house? You're able to live a fulfilling life when you cope with the factors that you were born into as they happen. When you don't live under the pretense that you can do everything you want just because you put the effort in. We think that's a lot healthier, and we think that's just better for people. Fundamentally, this debate was about happiness. We achieve a better, more reliable form of it on our side of the house. They never proved why that wasn't the case. I'm incredibly proud still to propose.
We'd like to thank the speakers for a fantastic debate. Please cross over to shake hands. Can we please have another round of loud applause for the audience for the final?